Welcome back. Today I will have a conversation with Chris Seepe. Recently, he has launched a petitions on change.org titled as "We Demand Automatic Eviction Orders for the Non-Payment of Residential Rent." Link is available in the description. Please sign if you haven't signed yet. Also share. Chris Seepe is a realtor with the AZTech Realty and the esteemed landlord of many units. He has first-hand experience on landlord and the tenant issues. He has written many articles in Real Estate magazine and also wrote two books on the landlording. Chris is also a president of the Landlord Association of Durham region. Before we deep dive into the discussion, please subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon notification for future videos on concerned discussion. Welcome, Chris, and thanks for sparing the time to talk to me in this busy schedule.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Can you tell me about the petition that you have recently launched? If you can share some key details of petition?
Sure. On February 21st, I wrote the petition and published it. It was in response to an email that I had seen going around from an organization, a tenant advocacy organization called Acorn. And they are asking for things that are really, really difficult to absorb and accept. In particular, vacancy control, rent control, no evictions, no rent evictions, all the things that that would be ruinous. It would literally put many of us out of business if all those things, especially vacancy control. So when that came around, I know that politicians have this, I don't know what it is, but a need in Ontario to satisfy tenants. And I was concerned. I thought, all right, well, what I'm going to do then is only ask for one thing. And that one thing was, when a tenant doesn't pay the rent, we want the eviction to be automatic. We don't want to be waiting months. There's no need for an adjudicator. There's no need to have a hearing. There's no need to, the only requirement is that the landlord shouldn't be lying or misrepresenting the fact. So there needs to be proof that the tenant has paid the rent. And if they haven't, then it should be automatic that the eviction takes place. The order for the eviction takes place immediately. Then it's turned over to the sheriff. The problem there is that the sheriff is already backlogged now, and that's why there is cousin to the demand, which is that all bailiffs in Ontario, all the private bailiffs, should be empowered with the same rights, or not rights, but I guess powers that the sheriff has for evictions. And that's how this whole thing started. In a period of a week, we've had, in 7 days, we got 25,000 signatures.
Oh, that's a tremendous response is getting from this one, because this is the biggest pain of the landlord as of now, because there are so many professional tenants who are taking the advantage of whatever the rules that is more in the favor of the tenant in Ontario, and backlog of the tenant board is one of the key factor for these the small landlords, right? The big corporation had a different way to handle the things. They have the more power.
Exactly.
Yeah, only the small landlords are always going through the pain.
Right.
And you have sent this copy of petitions to the various provincial leaders and local leaders as well. Does anyone contacted you back on this petition so far?
So when we reached 20,000 signatories, people who signed, I sent out the petition and a cover letter to the office of the Premier. I also sent it to his personal email address as an MPP. I sent the petition and cover letter to all 124 MPPs, which are members of provincial parliament. I sent it to the Attorney General. I sent it to the Ontario PC party because they have a majority and they're always asking for money for donations and so on. So I said, fix this problem and I'll send out an email to everyone saying that, you did good work and that they should consider a donation. I also sent it to CBC, CTV, several newsletters. I sent it to all the landlord associations. There's about, I don't know, 12 or 15 of them. But the two big ones, in particular, provincial ones, no one, not a single person has responded. None
And
of the political parties, none of the landlord associations.
but these, it's like very much we have seen that because politicians are very preserved when the landlord is coming into the questions, right? So they are more inclined toward the tenants. And I think in your initial the question that you answered, you mentioned that because these particular laws are mostly in the favor of the tenants as of now, right? I mean, if I will, they're totally imbalanced, right? I mean, I do you have figured that out? Like sometime because why these why these politicians are always talk about the more in the tenant side, not into the landlord side.
Well, I guess there'd be a few influences there. The most obvious one is that there are more tenants than there are landlords, and the politicians in Ontario seem to be famous or maybe infamous, for caring more about their votes than they are about doing what's politically right or making unpopular decisions that are nevertheless in the best interest of their constituents. So that would be one reason. I think a lot of Ontario politicians are populists. In other words, they care about popularity, not about leadership. A second is that Ontario has a history of being extremely socialist, right? The OHIP program, Ontario Hospitalization, is the envy of the world. We really have, we're spoiled in that regard. Some of our programs, like the Ontario Disabilities Program and Ontario Works, while there are all kinds of challenges that come with it, nevertheless, is still a step towards helping people who are, let's say, underprivileged, perhaps, low-income earners and so on. Ontario is one of the best places in the world to live. There's no question. But as a consequence of that, there's been a sense of overarching entitlement that tenants have developed. Like they feel they're owed a place to live. They feel that they don't have to pay rents. If they can't afford the rent, then we should be paying for it as landlords. If there's if they're unable to meet certain objectives, then it's our problem. They should not get any rent increases because they can't afford it. There's never a conversation about the affordability of the property. It's always about whether or not it's affordable to tenants, and that is fatally flawed. It's just wrong.
Yeah. Right now, when you mentioned about the housing crisis is right now is a burning issue, and that is everybody is talking about in the media platforms, and I think that will be the very hot topic for the next elections as well. Will be in the federal and the provincial level as well, and immigration flow. So even recently, there is another bill was introduced, a Bill 97, and which will be increasing the penalties of the unlawful evictions, which is like, again, I will thinking that is again in the favor of the tenants again. And mostly because the tenants who, it's not the all tenants are the bad tenants, but there are the like segments of the professional tenants, because who know about these loopholes, and they know, they are trained with that, and they know that how to take the advantage of the landlords, right?
Right.
So I mean, the government is always hesitant to take any steps toward these professional tenants, right? Even like sometime when we have the eviction orders, and there is an unpaid rent up to the 25,000 to the $50,000 sometimes. So why these the professional tenants, like the government is not looking to be, even like after the judgment, when it is completely cleared by the landlord and tenant board that this is the outstanding rent and that is unpaid, like still the professional tenants are untouchable.
Right. Well, I don't think of all the tenants who haven't paid their rent as professional tenants. I think many of the tenants have gotten into genuine financial crisis, right? The rents are too high, food has gone up, many lost their jobs because of COVID, family relationships deteriorated or fell apart. The professional tenant to me is someone who exploits all of the rules, and I think they're a minority, but
Mhm.
they're really damaging minority. And I believe that there are two questions there. The first one is, why does the government not go after not only professional tenants, but any tenant who hasn't paid the rent?
Yeah.
And the second question is, uh, why are they passing these kinds of laws like Bill 97? And well, I presume you'll be talking about the licensing, because that's something that you're facing in your city right now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to address it in the following way. I believe there are probably, I don't know, 30 different influences that have caused rents to skyrocket. And I would say 25 of them are government. But the tenants don't see that because the media doesn't talk about it. You know, there'll
Right.
be snippets from here and there, but the overarching issue here is that the Ontario government and Ontario municipalities have contributed immensely to the housing crisis and to the increase in the rents. It makes no sense whatsoever. There's no logic behind saying we need more affordable housing. And by the way, we're going to add taxes to make it more affordable. That just makes no sense. How can you add a tax and make
Mhm.
something affordable?
Right.
So the rent eviction tax, or in this particular case, I guess it's a law that's going to fine landlords. The licensing, what's that got to do with affordability? They want to improve the quality of a property, but they're going to impose thousands of dollars in inspection fees and an increased bureaucracy. Um, the the taxes that as a small landlord, we pay a 50% corporate tax, whereas all the big operators, anyone that has 5 or more employees, are considered active income companies, whereas you, I, and many of the people listening to this podcast are small landlords. We pay 50%, and and the large operators pay 12%.
Right.
So we're being hammered from every direction. Why do they not go after these tenants who haven't paid the rent and evict immediately? I think the answer is a combination of, again, a tenant votes and we want to be on the side of the tenants and all that stuff, and there's a socialist agenda. But I think there's also a very pragmatic aspect to it as well, which I don't agree with,
Mhm.
but I believe what's happening is that the landlord and tenant board, politicians, bureaucrats have been given unofficial instructions to keep tenants in their property as long as possible, even if it means upsetting the landlords. Now, there's no way to prove that, but it's very hard to explain the rationale of Ontario
Yeah.
otherwise.
And that is correct, because I read the one of the judgment, the landlord and tenant board judgment. In that one, they have a one clause where they are saying that try to be avoid the eviction unless you are not doing the unfair with the parties, right? So
Right.
it means that is indirectly giving that the more stress on that, keeping the tenant in the property as much as possible it can, like not to be, I mean, definitely, because when these clauses are interpreted by the different persons, because it depends on who is sitting on the chair, how that is like taking the decision at that different time. It's not always be a well balanced approach, because when that kind of the instructions are written in black and white papers, right?
But the question is, why are they doing that?
Exactly, and
And,
I think that's
and
the big
I think there are two answers. The first is that there's not enough housing. So where are these people going to live?
right,
Right. So you put them out on the street, what you're going to have is a rise in tent cities. We've already seen that in Toronto.
right,
And we're seeing it, in all kinds of other places. So it puts a huge strain on our social welfare infrastructure, unemployment, or employment insurance, as they call it today, and the, ODSP and OW and the municipal services that try and help, even the places of worship who try to help, right? They're all trying to keep people in their units. And
mhm,
the second is that if you've got desperate people living in desperate times and they've got no place to live, and they either face eviction or worse, there's a direct relationship between that and crime. So crime is going to go through the roof, which means the government has to spend more money on police forces,
right,
and jails are already overcrowded,
mhm,
and the courts are already overtaxed.
right.
So I think this is a one-dimensional, simplistic solution that bureaucrats and politicians have come up with, is let's upset the landlords. They've got the money. Let's keep them in the property as long as possible. And it's fatally flawed, because what's happening is all the landlords are leaving. All the condos in particular are no longer affordable as rental properties. So we've seen the largest amount of condo vacancies in the last 25 years. And that's because everybody that owned a condo for renting purposes can no longer carry the costs of interest and the condo reserve fees.
Mhm,
Sorry, not the condo fees, not the reserves, condo fees.
mhm.
So they're selling, which is good for the people who want to buy, but the people who want to buy can't qualify because of the government, um,
Mortgage.
the stress test, mortgage
Yeah.
stress test
Stress
in
test, yes.
particular, and lenders are heavily exposed because of 2008, 2009. Everybody is very gun shy about having too much over leveraged debt on their books. So the lenders are not qualifying people like they used to. So now you've got all these condos that are vacant, but no one is going to buy them or even operate them as a rental property, because either because they can't afford it or because they're afraid that once the tenant gets in there, they'll never be able to get them out and they'll lose everything. So the government
Exactly.
is shooting themselves in the face. On the one hand, doing all the things that we talked about, and they don't understand the repercussions that this is having. Ontario is the only province in Canada that had a net loss of rental properties. We built 94,000 homes last year, and we still lost 6,500 rental properties. No other province had that loss. So what is it about Ontario that's different than every other province? And the answer is the Residential Tenancies Act.
Mhm.
Every other province has the same interest issues, has the same building issues, has the same types of tenants, good and bad, and the same types of landlords, good and bad. The only difference is the provincial legislation, and it's brutal, as you described.
Yeah, I mean, the one point that you mentioned about that the politicians, the second point, to it will promote the crime, because that's why these people are keeping it. I never thought of that, because mean, that's why, because your experience and how much you have went through, and you did a study, and I really appreciate that, because you have gone so deep, right? And in your petitions, you also did the such a math. It's a $1 billion loss, that which is also
Annually.
annually. That is correct. So, I mean, when I jump to the next question, because I just want to mention, I'm not sure if you got a chance, but you are very up to date with the stuff. Yesterday, there is a task force on the housing and climate. They publish a blueprint report, and which is for the more and the better homes, with the name of that the report they publish. In that one, they are asking the provinces and cities to ease on their bylaws, and also better use of the land, and expedite the approval process. Also, the special thing is that sometime, because like townhomes and the semi-detached home, where usually you cannot make a legal basement of the parking restrictions, right? Specifically, they have mentioned about that. So they should ease out, remove that the parking minimum requirement in the term of the legalizations. And the specifically the term they are using is the pro dynasty legalizations. So mean, put the more populations close to the public transit and the existing community, so they will not have a 911 services overburden at the point, right? So I mean, if you are expanding, because everything expands, so at least. But I don't know, because how that will be feasible even today, is because when we are building a new school, or like, I mean, I have seen that in the new communities, the new school is built, and on the same year, I see the trailers are parked there, right? They have a trailer classrooms. So even in the very beginning, already these schools are overcrowded. Hospitals are overcrowded. Even they will be doing the dynasty or pro dynasty legalization, but how they gonna be still serve these people? Like, these the basic necessities will be still be a problem, right?
I think there's a more basic question there. They've made all these recommendations about the municipalities being more flexible and forgiving, basically, in their bylaws to allow for additional housing. But it doesn't, those are all symptoms of the rental housing crisis. It's not the cause. What is causing us not to have enough housing? What is the simplest, easiest thing that we could do as a province to create housing? And the answer is infilling. And what I mean by infilling, it's a real estate term that's essentially means second suites, basement suites, attics, and that type of thing. And that would take nothing, and you would literally get tens of thousands of units. But all of those second suites are being taken out of the market. And it's not because of high rents. It's not because of financing, although, there's some of that. It's because every landlord that owns a home and would be willing to rent out their basement, even spend money to renovate a unit, will not do so, because they're afraid that once the tenant goes in, they will never be able to get rid of them if the tenant doesn't pay the rent. They could lose their home. So the second suites would be an easy solution. And if you had the ability to evict in 30 days, I wouldn't even care about getting pay stubs or getting bank statements or getting, proof of ID and so on. If they didn't pay the rent at the end of 30 days, and I could prove that they didn't pay and they were evicted, then everything changes. Right. People would open up their homes and rent out the basements and do the renovations and so on. There's other issues, lots of them, but the one that trumps or takes priority over all the others is that we can't take the risk that we're going to get a tenant who can't pay the rent, and they stay in a place while we still have to pay the mortgage and the electricity and the water and the maintenance and the insurance, and especially property taxes. And that is what they should be working on, not bylaws, not red tape in the bureaucracy of the municipal governments and the 3-year delays and all that. That's all symptoms, not causal factors. You can solve this. We as a province can solve a lot of the housing if we made it desirable for landlords to rent out their extra space in their homes. It doesn't cost very much to do that, and it would be instant, literally a month, 2 months. It wouldn't take 3 years having to get approvals and build an apartment building.
Right. And recently, because we have seen that, the cash for keys, because people are asking for hundreds of $1,000s to evacuate that one. And in your petitions, you have gave the name cash for keys as extortion, which
Yes.
I also concur, and I agree with the statement. Shouldn't these incidents will be investigated by the police as a fraud instead of just a civil matters?
No. As much as I would like to say yes, fraud is a criminal act and is prosecuted by the crown or by the government. And not paying the rent is generally considered a civil matter and would be more akin or more like theft. They haven't, fraud is when you deliberately do something and cash for keys is legal. So you cannot prosecute someone because they're taking advantage of a bad set of laws that were created by politicians and a catastrophically failed judicial board in the LTB. You can't blame the tenant for taking advantage of that. It's immoral, but that's the human condition. Where fraud arises is if they took that money, those fees for keys, and then on their personal tax statement, they didn't declare the money. And they knew that they were supposed to declare the money, and they didn't. So that could be considered fraud because it's deliberate, and they are defrauding the government, both provincial and federal. And the other case where fraud would arise would be if they didn't pay rent for a year and they still take a deduction for their rent when they do their personal taxes. There's an allowance that says, how much did you pay for rent? And they say, $20,000, but they never paid it. So they know that they didn't pay it, but they falsified their tax record. So although we can't, and this is what I've suggested to landlords as part of the petition, in fact, although the chances of us getting our money back from this failed judicial system is slim to none. What we could do is we could report when we paid cash for keys to the anonymous tips online website of the CRA and declare that we paid this money. It's equivalent to issuing a T4A, and anybody can issue one.
Right.
So it's a benefit that they received. And when you pay cash for keys, you could also report that and say that they got this income. So if the tenants don't report it, not only would they have a higher tax amount because they didn't get the rent decrease on their taxes, but there is the potential for fraud, and fraud proven by the Crown for an amount over $5,000 carries a 2-year prison term.
Yep.
So that would be a pretty good incentive to not cheat on your taxes.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
It would also remind tenants that they have an obligation to society to pay their taxes. They can't just
Chris, so now we have seen that, especially in my city as well, some cities are trying to put the overhead expenses by these rental licensing on the landlords. How do you see that it will again in the favor of the professional tenants?
Not in this particular case. From my perspective, and I'll be very candid. I think it's just a money grab by government. They're looking for any way to find money. I fought the city of Oshawa for 3 years. That's how long it took to stop them, and they finally voted last October to not pursue it. The chairman of that council meeting essentially said passing this licensing program would result in chaos. Those were his words. And it's true. There are a significant number of consequences and downsides. The city recently did a presentation before a landlord association and said that the province has passed many, many laws, as has the municipalities. And we're doing we being bylaw officers and fire inspectors are doing you a big favor by inspecting your building so that you do not run afoul of all the laws that we passed. To me, that's the same as getting a virus company, an antivirus company, to secretly produce a virus, send it out to everybody, and then say, hey, we've got a cure. That's what the city is doing.
Yeah.
They claim that they're trying to maintain property standards, but a rational person would ask the following question: which is more important, having a few properties that are up to the standards that these bureaucrats think that should be in place, or having as many places as we can find to house the people at different levels of income? And there's this prima donna attitude within government, municipal government in particular, that we've got to maintain a certain minimum standard. And only people who have money or have a comfortable job or have nice, secure benefits can be in such an arrogant position to say that we will decide what the standard of living shall be for every tenant in the city. The consequence of that is that all the landlords just go somewhere else. And we're going to see that shrinkage. And the remaining properties, well, we all know that if you go to a marketplace and there are 7 apples and 3 people, then those apples are going to be very cheap. Yeah. But if there are 7 people and 3 apples, those apples are going to be very expensive, and not everyone's going to get one.
Right.
So the simple, it's simple economics 101, that if there aren't enough places to live, and by putting in licensing and impossible standards and charging thousands of dollars to beef up their bureaucracy with more and more, inspectors and bylaw officers and so on, that's only going to add to the cost of rental properties, because we will pass that cost on over time. And if there are less properties, then we're going to get higher rents. So in some respects, as dark as the following comment is, licensing may turn out to be a long-term benefit from the landlords who are still in the business, because all the other landlords will leave, tenants will not have a place to live, rents will go through the roof, and it will be, and then of course the government will blame us.
Right.
Rents are high, rather than because they put in licensing that was untenable.
Yep. I struggle to sit with my leaders here in the city. I only requested in face-to-face meeting. I was suggesting to the mayor that to be ask the councillors to be go into the every single ward, at least to be hear from the people, take the true feedback, have the community engagement. I don't know, because our city is very hesitant. They are not doing it. They just did the teletown hall and just the couple of questions, and the questions to whom they have taken it, only the 10 questions, and there are more than 700,000 people are living in Brampton, right? Yep. So there was a 7,000 was on the call, and I'm not sure how many questions they have asked it. I think not more than the 20 questions were asked, and they have concluded that, okay, we have the feedback. It is
Right.
just like an eye-washing type of the thing.
Of course.
Uh, I mean, I think they have made the mind, but they are so stubborn to listen. I documented my concern list into the booklet, and I hand over the booklet to the mayor. This is what is in my power to give it. So let's see that what will happen. But I mean, I know because our discussion is on the petitions, we're gonna be stay the focus on back on that petition itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you have mentioned that on the 15th March as a timeline. And
Yeah.
what is the next step on the 15th of March?
Well, that remains to be seen. I had expectations, not just hopes, but expectations that all of the landlord associations would get together and rally behind this cause, and they have not done so. There's, I'd say, three that sort of passed on the petition to their members a week after it went out. So they had, they at least did that, but no one has volunteered any of their services. And the two big operators, Solo and FRPO or Fripple, have not even contacted me.
Okay.
So they've got resources, they've got media contacts, and they've not offered any of that. So it remains to be seen. But the petition specifically says that if we don't hear back from the government, then we are going to look into asking every petitioner to pay $100. And you have 25,000 petitioners at $100. That's $2.5 million, and put that into a legal fund, and then look for a constitutional lawyer to bring a class action against the government. Previously, two people have tried to do that, but in both cases, I told them that it wasn't going to work, and they ignored me. And the reason that's not going to work is you cannot sue a government for doing what the law tells them to do. It's bad law, but they're still doing what they're supposed to do. So you can't convict somebody because they followed the law, good or bad. You've got to either show that the province has broken the law, which I believe they have. I believe they've breached our constitutional right to a fair and speedy trial under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it's called, specifically Section 11B. I also believe that they have inserted themselves into the middle of a contract by writing the contract themselves and then setting up their own arbitration or judicial system, the LTB, to administer that contract. It's unbalanced, it's unfair, and they've removed our right of repossession. When a tenant doesn't pay, we're guaranteed under contract law, and which is administered under common law, we're guaranteed that right of repossession, and the government has taken that away from us. I think there are arguments like that show that they've passed bad law, and that or they have breached fundamental law, Canadian law. So I've already reached out to three law firms that specialize in constitutional law, and I'm waiting for a reply.
Okay.
See what happens. On March 15th, if I don't get a reply, then we're at a turning point. I can't do it by myself. I won't do it by myself. If I don't have the support of the landlord community, I mean, obviously we got 25,000 signatures, so there's a grassroots movement. But if there's no support from organized landlord community, then a hard decision will have to be made then.
Yeah, sounds good. And I mean, I got in contact with the change.org company itself.
Yeah.
So they are introducing a feature called the media, and which they're going to be attached with the petitions, right? I mean, after our this video, the podcast which we are doing, and I will request them to be put as a media link in your petition itself, means so that
Okay,
the people get the so many questions get answered in the
right.
detail if anybody is willing to listen to that.
Well, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Change.org reached out to me as well. One lady there, she has a personal family experience where they lost a large sum of money because of a bad tenant.
Mhm.
And she asked if I would be okay talking to me. I said, of course, I'll talk to anybody, which is why I'm talking to you, right? Get the
Right.
message out. Um, and she said that CTV, a reporter from CTV was interested,
Right.
and they were going to contact me. And it's been 3 days now. I've not heard anything. So they could be busy,
Sure.
but they may have just told Change.org what they wanted to hear rather than, you know, actually have a genuine interest in the story. So
Excellent.
everything's up in the air right now,
Yeah.
basically.
Oh, that's great. I mean, definitely we will, because it will take some time, and I'm sure because this is a very genuine cause, and the people getting support. So now, because 25,000, how many landlords we have across the Ontario? It
100, 100, no, sorry. I have that number. It took
oh.
me years to find out what that number was, and it's not an exact number because nobody really knows. But
Mm-hmm.
CMHC asked no, sorry, StatsCan asked the CRA if they could do an aggregate
Okay.
total of all the people who had claimed rental income
Okay.
and across Canada. And the number that came back was 1.3 million.
1.3
3 million
million
Canadians claimed rental
Canadians.
income. Now that could be a basement, it could be, a store, it could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the bulk of it's going to be residential tenancy for sure.
Sure.
And Ontario represents 38% of Canada's population
Mm-hmm.
statistically. So uh, statistically, we would have 522,000 landlords in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
Despite politicians thinking that, there are, 10 times more tenants than there are landlords, it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically 2 to 1. There's about 1.4 or 3 to 1. 1.4 million, give or take, renters in Ontario, and there's 500,000 landlords. And there'd be a lot more if they would get their act straight.
Oh, yes, your data is tremendous. Like, I mean, you did definitely a big research on this topic.
Well, I know the
Yeah.
questions. If I ever get in front of a decision maker, I know the questions they're going to ask, and they're going to try and uh, make our claim, our goal,
Mhm.
look ridiculous. And I want to be in a position to say, no, this is a very legitimate claim, and it's a cause of many of your housing
Mhm.
issues. You
Right,
solve this one, and we'll solve a whole bunch of stuff.
right, right.
But
I mean, now you touch about the CRA as well. So,
yeah,
I mean, in the petitions you refer that there is also, there's the tax issues, right? I
right,
mean, sometimes it's a false claim and it's for the unpaid rent. Specifically, like if we are touching for the unpaid rent, right?
right.
I mean, can you little bit give the explanation in the little bit simple word, like how the CRA implications is going for this, the unpaid rent on the both landlord and the tenant sides?
Well, I don't have any inside knowledge of how the CRA works, except I know that they're overwhelmed. I know that my accountant and other people who are in the financial sector that I know, they all have a very difficult time reaching a real person at the CRA.
Mhm.
The CRA has hired a lot of individuals that are not trained well enough. It's not that they're incompetent. They're probably competent people, but they don't have the knowledge or the experience to answer the questions that people are calling upon them. And the CRA is also employing a tremendous amount of, let's call it artificial intelligence, but I wouldn't go that's too strong a word. They're using algorithms to look at patterns.
Mhm.
One of the things they could do, and this is what I tried to explain, on the CRA website, and there's no way to send them anything by email. They won't accept it.
Right.
So through their anonymous tips line,
Mhm.
I suggested that at the very least, they should ask every tenant in Ontario in particular.
Mhm.
The other provinces don't have this issue like Ontario does, but
Mhm.
and maybe it's against the law or human rights to pick on one province. I don't know, but
Mhm.
they should be asking every tenant for the rent receipt. And if they
Mhm.
don't have the rent receipt,
Mhm.
then they can't claim the deduction. So
Mhm.
their personal taxes will go up,
Mhm.
which becomes a concern for the tenants who haven't paid their rent, right? They're going to get hit the other way. The lawsuit or the class action that I've been, you know, proposing, let's say,
Mhm.
is at the provincial level. There is nothing that the CRA is doing wrong per se. I think there are things that they could do better that would help alleviate some of the pain that we have, but that's not their goal, right?
Mhm.
That's not their mission. And for them to have those resources would be, uh, might be a good thing, but it's probably not the best use of Canadian taxpayers' money. Fix the problem at the provincial level, and all these issues, with the CRA would also go away. I'm saying use the CRA as a landlord because that is one of the few things that a tenant in Ontario or a tenant advocate group or these radical tenants who say we're not paying the rent, at least there are mechanisms at the federal level through the CRA that would give the tenants pause for thought because they might win in the short term, but they get hit badly. And the worst case is they actually lie or they promote. And we've seen that on some of the YouTube videos. They promote the don't pay the rent. They won't get rid of, they can't get rid of you for a year. So they're trying to renovate and get rid of us. Just don't pay the rent. Anybody that does that is essentially uh, breaching the Residential Tenancies Act because the RTA specifically said that you've got to pay the rent, it's contract, and so on.
Right.
And the CRA may have probable cause to go after people like that who declared that they're not paying the rent simply because they didn't feel like they had to, they can save money. That could be construed. I'm not a lawyer, so I need to be
Mhm.
clear about that, right? This is
Yeah.
just research I've done. But in my opinion, not as a lawyer, but as a property owner, in my opinion, that could be construed as fraud.
Mhm. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
right, they falsified the record and they've preached, let's
Exactly.
break the law.
Exactly.
Uh,
So, I think this is a great discussion. We have touched the different aspects of these petitions, and definitely we will look forward to make a realistic actions are happening against that, and wishing that because government takes some considerations in this one because now upcoming elections are will be coming, and then we will see that because how we can advocate this point if it will be still there or we don't we not expecting because it will take so long because there should be some faster decisions should be happen.
right.
So at the end, would you want to save from, because you also mentioned that because it's not a, you are the initiator, right, of this cause.
Right.
You need a support from different organizations, landlords, and the local landlords who have signed the petitions. This is what you're gonna be, what you want to say to the people who are going to sign and who had already signed the petitions, how they can approach you and how what kind of the support they can provide you if they are willing to provide it, and if they want to be a volunteer for their services. how they will approach you and how they can
Well,
what kind of the service they can provide.
The single greatest issue about any petition is getting people to know about it and getting the government to pay attention to it.
Right.
And the government's not going to pay attention to it because one person, got a bunch of signatures together. They're going to pay attention either because they're facing a $1 billion, in fact, it could be a $3 billion lawsuit, depending on, how you calculate those things. When you go after the government, like one organization did, and sue them for $4 million, the Ontario government spends $8 million an hour on interest of the debt. $8 million in an hour. So a $4 million lawsuit is inconsequential. It's meaningless, right? And the only way you're going to get attention either is through, a legal action like that, and or preferably both, getting the media to say this is a legitimate issue. We can see that there would be all kinds of solutions. Why aren't you doing something about it? But the media is not picking up. They seem to be predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly pro-tenant. The poor tenant, the poor, unemployed person, the greedy, scum-sucking landlords who are, raising the rents, outrageously. Those are the stories that seem to get the eyeballs, and most of those stories in the media are one-sided. They do not ask the question. I mean, probably one of the most tragic stories that came out recently was the landlord who shot and killed 2 tenants. And they talk about how the landlord must have been, crazy, or they speculate on some of the things, or they give the impression that the landlord was, completely evil, and the tenants were just getting ready to leave, and they were, happily married, and they were going to be going to school soon, or to their new jobs or whatever. And without provocation, this landlord shot and killed them. But they never asked, the media never asked the question, why did the landlord do it? And the police never offered, why did the landlord do it? Was he crazy? Was he on drugs? Did the tenants say, use profanity and say, I'm not paying the rent, and if you don't like it, go sue me? And, who knows? Right. But one has to speculate that there had to be a trigger, significant emotional trigger for someone to cross over the line and commit murder. And I've looked online, I cannot find anybody that's reported on why that landlord did that. So I think it's a failing of media in general. And frankly, I don't want to go to war with the government and the media. That's a no-win situation, right? Right. So how can people help? If they've got contacts in the government, put the petition forward and say, Chris Seepe would love to, speak with you. He'll answer any question you've got and give his take on, the housing crisis and so on. The media, same story. If you've got a contact in the media, get them to contact me, or tell me who they are, and I will reach out and contact them.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, and thanks for your time. And it was a great discussion. I hope government will make the good decision as a balanced law. And even in my city, I'm struggling with that. I mean, I have been through the media chase, because definitely when the people are in the power, they know that how to drive the medias. There was some fake news were also circulated because of in the retaliation of our protest. But definitely we are the warriors, and we're gonna keep fighting. And it was nice talking to you.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Ravi. I hope I was able to answer some questions for you.
Please subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon notification for future videos on concerned discussion.